Imagine you're just, walking down the street and you step in this huge muddy puddle.
Right.
And suddenly you're wondering, is my shoe legally impure now? Like, can I still go perform my daily prayers, or do I need to rush home and wash up?
Yeah, I mean, most people today would just look at the mud, feel totally disgusted, and assume, well, it's dirty.
Exactly.
But these early legal scholars, they didn't operate on disgust at all. They operated on strict certainty.
Which is wild. So today, we're taking a deep dive into this incredibly granular legal landscape. We're looking at a fascinating, detailed transcript of a lecture on classic Islamic jurisprudence.
Specifically focusing on a foundational text called Matnabi Shuja.
Right, and it goes into the meticulous rules of purification, which is known as tahara. And really, the mission for our deep dive today is to explore how these early scholars didn't just write religious theory. They essentially engineered this highly systematic, granular framework for daily life.
Down to the absolute molecule.
Literally. Starting with something as basic as water, we are going to look at how a puddle on the street, a metal tin sitting in the hot sun, and the fur of a coyote all somehow fit into this ancient, meticulously organized legal code. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. So before we even get into the specific rules about that muddy puddle, we actually need to look at how this text expects you to learn in the first place.
Right, the methodology.
Exactly. The source material spends a surprising amount of time right at the beginning just explaining educational psychology, basically. It introduces this concept of a muktasar.
Which is like a foundational summary book, right?
Yeah, basically the absolute core bullet points of a subject.
No tangents, no massive debates.
None of that, just the raw foundations. Because, if you hand a beginner a 20-volume encyclopedia of dense legal arguments, their brain just short circuits.
Totally.
You need a sturdy foundation. Otherwise, you run into this severe cognitive overload.
There is this incredibly vivid quote from the source that just perfectly captures this. It says, "The food of the elder is the poison of the baby."
I love that line. It's so accurate. I mean, think about feeding a newborn baby a dry-aged steak.
Oh man, terrible idea.
Right. The steak is objectively nutritious, it's highly valuable, but it will severely harm the baby because they just don't have the teeth or the digestive system to process it yet.
They literally can't swallow it.
Exactly. And the text argues that information works the exact same way.
Which we see all the time today, honestly. People read like one advanced article online and suddenly think they're an expert.
Oh, constantly. And the source points out that historically, students always wanted to skip the basic bullet points. They wanted to jump straight into the massive advanced text.
Like Sahih Bukhari, right? The major collection of prophetic traditions.
Yeah, but jumping to those advanced texts creates this very dangerous illusion of knowledge.
Because they lack the context.
Right. A student reads a highly nuanced tradition, but they don't have the foundational principles to understand its legal or historical context. So they go out into the world making these massive, almost laughable mistakes, all while truly believing they are a scholar.
It's like trying to assemble a complex engine by just staring at a finished sports car rather than opening page 1 of the instruction manual.
That is a great way to put it.
Like, you might know what the car looks like, sure.
Yeah.
But you have zero idea how the pistons actually fire. You absolutely need the manual first.
Or the flip side happens, right? They get entirely overwhelmed by the engine, think the whole religion is just impossibly complicated, and they just quit entirely.
Or just walk away. So the manual they are learning in this context is the science of Fiqh. And the source makes this really fascinating distinction between what that word means linguistically versus its strict legal definition.
Yeah, linguistically, fiqh just means deep understanding. The Quran uses it in this general sense, like when the prophet Moses asks God to untie his tongue so the people can deeply understand his speech.
But the scholars took that broad concept of deep understanding and basically built a highly specific legal terminology around it.
Exactly. In this text, fiqh specifically refers to rulings about the actions of a person.
Actions, not
Yeah,
beliefs.
yes, actions. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can really see how early scholars compartmentalize human knowledge to make it digestible.
Break it down.
Right. If you want to figure out what to believe about God or the nature of the universe, you study theology. But if you want to know how to physically exist in the world...
How to pray, how to buy something, how to get married.
Exactly. You study fiqh. It completely isolates the mechanics of human behavior.
And the mechanics we are looking at in this text come from a madhab, specifically the madhab of Imam Shafi'i. Now, people usually translate that word as a school of thought.
Yeah, that's the common translation.
But the lecture clarifies it's actually more of a highly systematic curriculum. It's a compilation of rulings extracted by these early scholars.
Right. The founders of these schools, like Imam Shafi or Imam Malik, they spent their entire lives extracting very practical, everyday rulings from the primary texts, like the Quran and the traditions.
Doing all the heavy lifting.
Exactly. And then over generations, their top students compiled and organized these rulings into a structured curriculum for everyday people.
Oh, wait, hold on. Let me push back on this a bit. Because the text explicitly points out that these imams actually hated fanatical blind following.
Oh, they despised it.
Right, like Imam Shafi famously said that if his opinion contradicts the foundational texts, people should take his opinion and literally throw it against the wall.
He did say that, yeah.
So if they specifically told people not to blindly follow them, why do these four specific schools of thought completely dominate today, 1,000 years later?
It's a great question. But the survival of these four schools wasn't about enforcing some cult of personality around the founders.
Okay, then what was it?
It was purely about practicality and just the sheer quality of the curriculum. I mean, imagine a layperson, a farmer, or a blacksmith who hasn't spent decades mastering ancient Arabic grammar or historical narration chains or complex legal principles.
Right, they have a day job.
Exactly. If you tell that farmer to go figure out exactly how to wash their face for prayer by cross-referencing thousands of raw primary texts, they're going to be completely lost.
They wouldn't even know where to begin. It'd be the poison of the baby all over again.
Exactly. The imams recognize that the average person needs a reliable, organized guide. These four specific schools survived the centuries simply because those imams happen to have the most dedicated, brilliant students who meticulously organize their legal rulings into the best curriculums available.
That makes total sense. Using one of these curriculums prevents the layperson from making those beginner mistakes.
Precisely.
So we have this masterful organized framework for human action. How do they actually map out a person's life? Because the text divides fiqh into four massive categories.
Right. It attempts to categorize literally every single thing a human being can do from birth to death.
Which is incredibly ambitious.
It really is. The four quadrants are acts of worship, human interactions, and transactions.
Which covers what? Economics, buying, selling, renting.
Exactly. Then the third is social and human relations, handling things like marriage and divorce. And finally, criminal law.
It's literally an entire operating system for a civilization. But our deep dive today is hyper-focused on just the very first chapter of the very first category.
Right, acts of worship.
And before you can even begin to worship, you have to establish tahara, or purification.
Because logically, you cannot stand before God to perform acts of worship like the daily prayers without first being in a state of purity.
But tahara isn't just, taking a shower, right?
No, not at all. The text defines it as doing two distinct things: removing physical impurity and uplifting a state of hadath.
And hadath is a really tricky concept for modern minds because it's a completely non-physical state of impurity.
Right. It's unseen.
The text outlines a minor state, which requires washing the face and limbs, known as wudu, and then a major state, which requires a full-body bath, known as ghusl. But you cannot see hadath with the naked eye.
You can't, and that unseen nature of hadath is so important because it frames purification as a spiritual prerequisite, rather than just basic bodily hygiene.
Right, it's not about just washing off dirt.
Exactly. You could step into a shower, scrub yourself with soap until your skin is squeaky clean and physically spotless. But if you didn't have the explicit internal intention to uplift that unseen state of hadath, you are still legally in a state of impurity regarding worship.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. I was trying to wrap my head around this concept, and it honestly feels exactly like being logged out of a highly secure computer system.
Oh, that's an interesting way to think about it.
Think about it. You can't visually see that you are logged out.
Oh.
There's no physical dirt or grime on your keyboard indicating a problem.
Yeah.
It's an entirely unseen, non-physical status. And no matter how much you physically polish your monitor or wipe down your desk, you still don't have access to the network. You cannot perform the prayer until you go through the precise, step-by-step re-authentication process to change your system status.
That analogy actually captures the mechanism perfectly. You are authenticating your spiritual state. And to execute that authentication process to achieve tahara, you need a very specific instrument. You need the right tool for the job.
And for these early scholars, that essential tool was water.
Yes.
And the source lays down this incredible golden rule right up front. It says, all water is pure until proven impure.
Which functions as a massive principle of legal ease. The foundational ruling is always the assumption of purity.
Right. It prevents the legal system from collapsing under the weight of human paranoia.
Exactly.
The lecture gives that puddle example we started with. You see a puddle on the pavement. People are walking through it with their muddy shoes. Your brain immediately associates mud and street runoff with dirt, so you assume the water is legally impure.
Naturally, yeah.
But the legal code demands proof. Can you explicitly prove there was a legally defined impurity on those specific shoes before they stepped in the puddle?
And unless you can point to a specific defined impurity, the water remains legally pure. The law demands objective evidence, not subjective suspicion.
But they don't just leave water as one big generic category, do they? The scholars broke it down into 4 highly specific classifications.
They did. Category 1 is water that is pure in itself and purifying for you.
So this is your baseline: natural water, rainwater, seawater, melted snow, river water.
Right. You can drink it, and you can use it to uplift that unseen state of hadath.
Okay, so that's the easy one. But category 2 introduces some really fascinating historical context. It's water that is pure, but using it is considered disliked.
Yeah, and the classic example given in the text is water left out in a metal tin under the hot sun.
Which is so specific. Why would the sun hitting a metal tin matter at all?
This is a perfect snapshot of medieval medical logic intercepting with the law. Some early scholars believed that the intense heat of the sun caused toxic elements to separate from the metal and infuse into the water.
Oh, wow.
And they thought washing with this water caused leprosy. So the law adapted to the medical understanding of the time, ruling it disliked out of caution for public health.
Though the lecturer points out that modern medicine doesn't support that leprosy claim at all today.
No, not at all.
Because of that, some later scholars argue it isn't actually disliked anymore. The law updates as the science updates.
Exactly.
Then we have category 3, which is water that is pure in itself, but non-purifying. You can drink it, but you can't use it to log back into the system, so to speak.
Right. This includes water that has already been used by someone else for their purification rituals.
So you can't recycle the ritual water.
No. The historical texts mention that the companions of the prophet, even when they were in the desert facing severe water shortages, never reused the runoff water from someone else's purification.
That shows how strict the category is.
Yes. And the other major type in this category is what they call changed water.
Meaning, like, if you add tea leaves to water, it becomes tea.
Right.
If you spill a cup of tea on your shirt, you don't have to frantically wash it off before praying because tea is a physically pure substance. However, you cannot use a cup of Earl Grey to perform your purification rituals.
Mm-hmm.
It has fundamentally lost the name of water.
It has to retain its absolute baseline elemental identity.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that logic for a second.
Sure.
Because the source says muddy water is perfectly fine. So if the River Thames is full of brown mud and silt, they say that's acceptable for purification.
Yes, it is.
But if I take a glass of crystal clear water and put a single drop of expensive, beautiful rose extract in it, it's suddenly ruined. How does a muddy river work? But hygienic rose water is legally useless.
I know, it feels counterintuitive at first, but it comes back to the strict categorical definitions the scholars use to build this system.
Okay, how so?
Well, mud is considered a natural, native part of the earth where water resides. Mixing the two doesn't change the elemental identity of the liquid. Society still looks at it and calls it muddy water.
Right, it still has water in the name.
Exactly. But the moment you introduce rose extract or orange juice or squash, you have fundamentally altered its chemical category. Society no longer calls it water, they call it a beverage or a perfume.
Ah, I see.
The law requires the purest, most basic element of life to uplift that spiritual state.
That actually makes a lot of sense when you frame it around the elemental identity. But what happens when the water itself is compromised by an actual impurity?
Well, this introduces the fourth and final category. Impure water, or Naji's water.
Right, and this is water where an explicitly defined impurity has fallen into it.
Yeah.
But the scholars didn't just say, if a drop of impurity falls in, it's entirely ruined.
No, they engineered a complex volume threshold to determine the legal status. This introduces the measurement known as the two qualas.
The source explains this. It's named after these massive jugs made by the ancient Hajar tribe in Yemen. And 2 of these jugs equals roughly 190 liters of water.
Which is a very specific amount. And that volume threshold acts as a crucial legal buffer for daily life.
Let's visualize this for a second. Picture a standard bathtub filled to the brim that's roughly 190 liters.
Right.
If a single drop of impurity falls into that tub, the legal system says, don't worry about it. The sheer volume of the water defeats the small impurity.
Exactly. The entire bathtub remains legally pure unless that one drop was somehow so potent that it actively changed the taste, color, or smell of the water.
But if that same drop of impurity hits your little 1-liter hydro flask,
The entire bottle is legally impure instantly.
even if the color and smell haven't changed at all,
Yep. The large volume protects itself. The small volume is instantly compromised.
the precision provides clear, measurable boundaries for everyday life. But here's the next logical step. If water is the tool we use to cleanse impurity, we logically have to define what actually counts as impure in the first place.
Right. We need to know what we're washing away.
And the source is very clear that legal impurity, which is called najasa, is completely divorced from what society simply finds gross.
What's fascinating here is how the legal code actively removes the emotional ick factor entirely.
Thank goodness, because human disgust is so subjective.
Extremely subjective. One culture might find eating a certain insect repulsive, while another considers it a delicacy. Fiqh replaces that subjective disgust with strict, standardized categorical definitions, so the law applies equally to everyone.
For example, human saliva. If someone spits on your shirt, culturally that is disgusting.
Yeah.
You feel gross.
Very gross, yeah.
But legally, according to the Sharia, human saliva is completely pure. It is not legally najis.
Because the foundational rule of certainty applies again. Everything on earth is pure unless explicitly defined as impure by the foundational texts.
Okay, so if subjective disgust doesn't matter, what actually makes the list of impure things? The source outlines predators with canines like lions, hyenas, or wolves.
Right.
Birds of prey with claws like eagles and falcons, pigs and dogs, any unslaughtered dead animal, so roadkill or an animal that just dies of old age in a field. And then biological fluids like blood, pus, and liquid intoxicants.
The general rules are strict, sure, but the exceptions the scholars derived are just as systematic, and they reveal a really deep pragmatism.
Like what?
Take cats, for example. A cat is a predator with canines. By the general rule, a cat should be impure.
Right, it fits the description perfectly.
Yet there is a specific prophetic tradition exempting cats, rendering them legally pure. Why? Because they are ubiquitous.
They're everywhere.
They live in our homes, they walk across our rugs. The law recognizes the extreme hardship it would cause people to constantly avoid cat hair or cat saliva, so it provides an exemption based on necessity.
It's incredibly pragmatic. Another fascinating exemption involves insects.
Oh, right.
Insects that don't have a flowing bloodstream, like ants, bees, or flies, are considered pure. If a fly lands in your water, it doesn't render it legally impure because it lacks flowing blood.
We see the intersection of ancient law and early biological observation there. The presence or absence of a circulatory system becomes the exact hinge upon which the legal ruling turns.
So what does this all mean for someone navigating the modern world? Say you go to an antique store and find an old, beautiful ivory trunk, which is essentially made of animal bone.
Right.
Or you buy a high-end wallet made out of coyote skin. A coyote is a canine predator. It falls under the impure category. How does a modern person apply these 1,000-year-old classifications to something they just bought at a boutique?
Well, this is where we encounter the legal concept of dibya, or tanning. The source explains that while the skin of a dead animal is generally impure, the intense physical process of tanning completely transforms its legal status.
By treating the skin with water and harsh acidic chemicals, I think they used specific seeds or barks in ancient times, the actual chemical makeup of the skin changes.
Exactly. The chemical process of tanning purifies the skin so it can be used practically as leather.
So that coyote skin wallet.
It is perfectly fine to carry in your pocket while you pray. The only strict categorical exceptions to this tanning loophole are the skins of dogs and pigs. The texts dictate those can never be purified for use, no matter how heavily processed they are.
Wow. And the source also notes that the fur and hair of animals are considered pure from the start because they don't contain life or flowing blood in the same way flesh does.
Right.
And the bone, like the ivory in that antique trunk, is heavily debated among scholars. But many rule that since ivory is just the bone of an elephant, it's permissible to own and use. It's not legally najis.
The entire system creates a manageable standardization for the everyday person.
It really does.
You don't have to suffer moral panic over an antique trunk, a leather wallet, or a puddle on the street because the legal categories have already mapped out the absolute boundaries of purity and impurity for you.
It really is a masterclass in organization. When we zoom out and look at this incredible journey we've just been on in this deep dive, we started with the educational psychology of the food of the elder, ensuring we build a sturdy foundation before jumping into complex primary texts.
Right.
We saw how scholars mapped out the massive quadrants of human action, finding our specific place in the category of worship. We explored the unseen login authentication status of Hadath.
Which was a great analogy, by the way.
Thank you. And we drilled all the way down to the elemental identity of a cup of tea, the exact 190-liter volume of a Hajar tribe water jug, and the chemical transformation of a coyote skin wallet.
It just highlights how these scholars viewed their reality. They didn't see chaos. They saw a universe that could be understood, categorized, and engaged with through extreme intentionality.
That's the perfect word for it, intentionality.
It's about moving through the world not by accident, but on purpose.
Which connects directly back to you, listening right now. This text isn't just a relic of ancient history. It is a profound demonstration of how human beings attempt to systematize and bring intentionality to the overwhelming chaos of daily life.
Absolutely.
Which leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over. If an ancient legal code could bring this much extreme intentionality, structure, and philosophical weight to a single drop of water or a muddy puddle on the pavement, what overlooked mundane resource in your own daily routine could benefit from a bit of that deep understanding? Because it turns out, a puddle isn't just a puddle. Sometimes it's the gateway to understanding the entire system.